My fiance suddenly became close to a young female colleague. It's time to set boundaries. I have been best friends with my boyfriend since 2013. We even lived together during graduate school for 2 years before we started dating. We started dating in 2016, when we were roommates, so we've been together for about 2.5 years now and have lived together for a lot of that time. We did a brief stint of long-distance work when we got jobs in different locations after school. In January of this year, he moved states to be with me, and I still can't get over how amazing that was of him. We are now living together again in our own apartment, and we couldn't be happier. He is my best friend and absolutely the person I plan to spend the rest of my life with. He's smart, funny, an absolute sweetheart, and a romantic, and he makes me feel so loved every day. We have talked about our future many times, and I anticipate a proposal in the near future. Also, he has had many female friends during our time together, and this has never bothered me. I'm rarely the jealous type. He's hung out one-on-one with girls before, and I had no complaints. There has been one girl I told him I was uncomfortable with, and he stopped hanging out with her, but that was for a lot of reasons, not just because she's a girl. After moving to my state, he had to pass a couple of tests in our field before he could start working. He did so and was able to secure a job in early June. He likes his new job so far and generally likes and gets along with his coworkers, but he hasn't really made any real friends yet. He's hung out with my coworkers and sort of friends too and likes them as well, but there's no one he would hang out with one-on-one. I know he is missing having a group of friends back in his home state, where he moved from. I'm also pretty new to the area. About a month ago, maybe a little more, he started mentioning one coworker a lot. We'll call her Liz. At first, it was just in passing, "Oh, my coworker Liz said this or that." It also turns out Liz used to work with an organization that works closely with my organization, so she knows a lot of people that I work with and what's going on with my job and field of work. So it was a small world kind of thing. She would mention someone I knew or something about my job, and he would tell her he also knew that person because of me. That kind of thing. But he started talking about her more and more often. I'm talking probably every single day, and for a few weeks he would have a story about Liz or something that she said, so I knew they were talking or hanging out at work a lot. He did say that Liz mentioned she wanted to meet me, and she has a fiance that she lives with, so that made me feel good. There was nothing to worry about, and I was happy he was making a friend here. Liz actually lived nearby, in a temporary place, because they were moving around for her fiance's job. So a couple of weeks ago, he told me that Liz suggested they start carpooling to work together. Their office is about 30 minutes away without traffic, but our city always has traffic, so it's more like 45 minutes each way most days. Honestly, this made me a little uncomfortable, since this meant they would be spending 1 to 1.5 hours alone in the car every time they rode together. But I didn't say anything because they wouldn't be carpooling every day. Some days they work in the office and other days they work on projects around town, so this would only be days when they both go into the office, maybe 2-3 days a week. Besides, he only mentioned it in passing as an idea at first. A few days later, as he was headed out the door, he said, "Okay, I'm going to go pick up Liz and head into work." I was surprised because he never told me they decided to definitely start carpooling together, but it obviously wasn't a big deal. He has never mentioned it again, so as far as I know, that's the only day they've ridden together. It hasn't been an ongoing thing. I was fine with this. Things started intensifying quickly last week, though. As I mentioned, Liz and her fiancé were in a temporary place before, so they decided to start looking for a permanent apartment. My boyfriend casually mentioned to me one day last week that they were actually interested in our building and that they wanted to come see it the next day. This came out of left field for me. Our building is very nice. It's a luxury building in a good area downtown, but there are also tons of similar buildings in the area. But I figured they were just checking out all kinds of places, and ours was probably one of many on the list. So late last week, they came by our building for a tour. I actually saw them briefly on the elevator, and we met for the first time, but they were being given a tour by management, so we didn't hang out. Later that night, Liz texted my boyfriend that they had decided to rent our building. I honestly didn't know what to say because I wasn't thrilled. I felt like now they will definitely want to start carpooling together every day they can, and they will start becoming even closer. My boyfriend was obviously very happy about it when he told me. I just kind of asked if they were looking at any other places and why they weren't looking any closer to where she and my boyfriend work. He said they just really liked this building, and her fiancé works more closely in our area, so it works for them to live here. Obviously there was nothing I could say, so I just said cool. Ever since then, I feel like they have already been talking more and more. They text and have called each other a couple of times. To be fair, As far as I know, it has all been either work or apartment related. But I also don't really see his phone, and I have no idea how much they actually talk. Up until now, I wasn't thrilled about all of this, but I could deal with it. This weekend, we traveled to visit my family for the holiday weekend. Yesterday, during a family lunch, he got up and went into the other room with his phone for a few minutes. When he came back, I asked, "Where'd you go?" And he just said, "I was getting a phone call." Later, I asked who was calling him at lunch. He said it was Liz with a few questions because they were moving in at the time. This slightly bothered me because I feel like if I hadn't asked, he wasn't planning to tell me it was Liz who called. He went back to our city last night while I was staying in my hometown with my family for a couple of extra days. While driving him to the airport, I got a random thought, so I asked, "You're just going to take an Uber back home, right?" That's how we got to the airport. He kind of hesitated and then said, "I was actually going to see if maybe Liz could pick me up, so I don't have to spend money on an Uber." Yet again, I felt like he never would have mentioned this to me if I hadn't asked. Also, we live close to the airport, so an Uber is not expensive, and he makes good money. I reminded him that Liz and her fiance were moving that day and probably did not want to come pick him up at the airport, and he thought about it and agreed. He didn't end up asking her. I don't know what to do from here. On one hand, I am genuinely glad he's making a friend. There are no red flags so far. Things seem 100 platonic. Plus, she has a fiance, so we could all be couple friends. On the other hand, he seems to be getting really close to her really quickly. He talks a lot about her constantly. They are probably going to be writing together often, and I feel like he is starting to unconsciously hide some interactions with her from me. Is it time to set boundaries? If so, what would reasonable boundaries even be? Is carpooling together too much? Is it okay for them to hang out alone outside of work? I have no idea, and I've never been in this situation before. I don't know how to talk to him about this. I just feel like we need to have a talk now that she is living in our building, but maybe I should wait and see if things escalate. I came home from the trip with my family a couple of days later. I told my boyfriend that I wanted to talk to him about something, and I brought up his friendship with Liz. I told him that I didn't want to discourage him from having a friend, but I also felt like they were talking quite a lot and spending a lot of time together, and that it was starting to make me feel uncomfortable. My boyfriend took it really well. He immediately reassured me that he only saw her as a friend and that he hadn't even realized how it could look to me. When I brought up how I felt like he wasn't being forthcoming with information, like how he didn't mention the phone call from her, he said that was 100 unintentional. He then immediately asked what he could do going forward to make me feel more comfortable. He offered to stop carpooling with her and to cut down on contact with her except for work-related stuff. I told him I didn't have a problem with the carpooling because financially it does make sense, but maybe he could try to text and call her outside of work a little bit less. He spends a lot of money on gas. I also told him I would really love to meet her and her fiancé, and he enthusiastically agreed. He set up a hangout for the following weekend. The two of us and Liz and her fiancé all went out for drinks at a bar by our building. They'd moved in by now. It was actually really fun. It turns out we all have a ton in common. Liz and I do very similar work, and we all have common nerdy interests. It was a little awkward at first, as meeting new people often is, but once we all got comfortable, we had a blast. From there, we have all become fast friends, and Liz and I have developed our own separate friendship too. We text often, go over to each other's places for dinner sometimes, and hang out on weekends. I can honestly say I really like Liz and her fiancé and trust them 100. I no longer have a problem with her friendship with my boyfriend at all. They do still carpool sometimes, but they've never hung out alone outside of work. It's always the four of us. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Finally, I have a separate, but slightly related. My boyfriend is now my fiancé. Less than a month after I made my last post, he took me out for a really beautiful and romantic dinner. When we came home, our apartment was covered in roses and candles. I was so shocked I could barely move as he got down on one knee and proposed. I said yes, and then I cried for about 2 hours as we called all of our friends and family. It was absolutely perfect, and we are getting married next year. It turns out that Liz actually helped him plan the proposal, and that was part of why they were talking a lot too. Since she lives in our building now, he had all of the flowers, candles, champagne, and accessories shipped to her and kept at her place until he was ready for them. He even had her hold on to the ring the week before he did it. After he proposed, She came upstairs, took photos for us, and cried with us. That was the moment I realized what a great friend she is to both of us. So communication saves the day again. We're all great friends now, and Liz and I have regular girl nights to plan our weddings together. I talked to my boyfriend, and he introduced me to Liz and her fiance right away. We're all great friends now, and I'm no longer uncomfortable. I am engaged now. My husband wrote a letter confessing his love to a young medical student and maintained that affair for 3 years. My husband and I, both 35, met in college. We fell in love and got married 8 years ago. I gave birth to our daughter in 2020. My husband is a professor at this medical school. He's a doctor himself. My friend, Sarah, also works at the same college, and she's in the same department as my husband. A few months ago, in December, Sarah took me out for lunch and told me that she suspected something was going on between my husband and this medical student 25F. She claimed she'd seen both of them give yearning looks to each other. She said that she's known my husband for so long, and she'd never seen him talk to any other women like this. He'd been so aloof around women all these years, but it's just different with this one girl. At that moment, I laughed at her face. I remember telling her that she's jumping to conclusions based on these supposed yearning looks. That's why I didn't tell you before, she said. I was confused too. It's not like he goes out of his way to talk to her, but whenever they do talk, it's like watching a slow burn romance movie. She looks at him like he's Brad Pitt, and he looks at her the way he used to look at you. I remember the exact words because they stung. Internally, I was breaking down. Externally, I just smiled and told her that she was probably overthinking. That night, I casually mentioned this to my husband. I was laughing at the absurdity, and I expected him to join in and deny the wild possibility that he's in love with a student. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at me, all teary-eyed, and said, "I'm sorry. I can't get her out of my mind. I've tried. Trust me. I should have told you sooner, but I thought I could save our relationship. I really wanted to." I asked him if he'd cheated on me. He said no. He said he didn't even talk to her, nor did they have any contact outside of college. He completely understood how morally depraved it is to try and pursue a relationship with a student. She wrote him a letter about a year ago, confessing her love for him, and he told her that even though he was into her, nothing would come out of it. Apparently, that was when the yearning looks started. I honestly don't remember how I reacted then. I think I just started packing and came to live with my parents and my daughter. I've been living with my parents since then. Half of me wanted him to come and beg for forgiveness, but he never did. He comes by sometimes to spend time with our daughter, but that's it. He never talks about the elephant in the room, nor do I bring it up. I keep checking that girl's social media. She's insanely beautiful, almost doll-like, and intelligent. I can't help but think that someone like him should be with someone like her. He's always been very good looking, and I'm more of a plain Jane. She's Meredith to Derek. I don't know what to do. What do I even tell people? I don't even know who I am without him. Some part of me still wants him to come back. I met up with Sarah for dinner. I thanked her for telling me about my husband and the student, and also for being such a good friend. I asked her about my husband. She said there was nothing unusual. He's been a bit withdrawn and aloof with everyone lately, but that's about it. Yesterday, I went over to my house unannounced. He was there alone in his office. I told him I wanted to talk. He said he'd explain everything. So apparently, this woman has had a crush on him for 2 years. Her friends ship her with him. She would stare at him during her rotations and blush whenever he looked at her or talked to her. Back then, he didn't think much of it. Many girls have had crushes on him, and he always ignored them. About 1.5 years ago, they were in the same research group. I don't know how this works, but there were 5 to 6 people along with these two. Because of this, they had to spend some time together working, and it was then that he started noticing her. He went into detail about how he was impressed with her intelligence and her beauty. The moment he realized that he had a crush on her, he dropped out of the research thing. This was a year ago. A few weeks later, she gave him the letter confessing that she had feelings for him. The first thing he told her after reading it was, "You can get into trouble because of this." She didn't care. She wanted an answer. "Is it all in my head?" she had asked, to which he replied, "It's not just in your head, but nothing can come out of it. I hope you understand." That was the last time they interacted. According to him, the yearning looks Sarah described were more of awkward eye contact than anything else. He told me that even though he is still attracted to her, he has no intention of pursuing any sort of relationship with her, regardless of whether we stay together or not. He said he's willing to change his job and go to therapy. I told him to give me some time to think about it. To sum up, This has been going on for 3 years. Not once did he mention anything to me. The student and he spent a considerable amount of time last year working on the research. He told her he liked her back, and he's still very much attracted to her. And that's why I've decided to go ahead with a divorce. I don't think I can trust this man again, and a relationship without trust isn't something I am interested in. I've told my parents about it. They're not exactly on board, but they're still supportive. I've also contacted my lawyer about the same. It's going to be a long process, I believe.